Hey everyone, it's Kable here, and it's time for I don't really want to call this video a review. Maybe it is, but I feel like it's a bit more unorthodox compared to past reviews. But regardless, today I want to talk about this Death in June album, but what ends when the cymbals shatter. This is the 1992 studio album from the infamous Neofolk project Death in June, spearheaded by one Douglas P. Now, I call this project infamous because, well, if you're not aware, Douglas P has some very far right leaning political viewpoints. I know that some people will say that all of that is just for show, but I can't help but feel like he actually does believe in these viewpoints in some sense. If nothing else, this project has certainly attracted a bunch of dipshits that I wouldn't want anywhere near me. Yeah, similar to another movement that was happening in Europe around the time of this album's release, that being black metal, Neofolk has a Nazi problem, and I think Douglas P. of Death in June is perhaps the most infamous figure within that scene in that regards. Similar to how, say, Varg Vikernes of Burzum fame is the most infamous figure within black metal around that time. Why am I saying all this? Well, I just want to make it clear that I in no way endorse the beliefs that Douglas P. or really anyone else in a similar vein of him has. And yes, I am aware that I am just giving him more exposure, no matter how small, by making this video and praising his music, but I just find this album to be very great, and I just want to talk about why it is I love it, and Douglas P, the person, is not one of those reasons. So I just want to say to Douglas P, if you or any other Nazi is somehow watching this video, please fuck off. Okay, with that ramble out of the way, mostly, let's talk about the evolution of Death in June, because when it first started back in the early 80s, it was actually a band, more or less, and its sound was rooted in the styles of, mainly post-punk and darkwave. However, by the mid-80s, the project had essentially become a Douglas P. solo project, similar to how another folk project, Sun Kill Moon, started off as a band before devolving into a Mark Kozlik solo effort. It's also worth noting that it was also around this time when the project started to shift away from post-punk and into what we now know as Neofolk. If you don't know what Neofolk is, there's this great video done by Wyattxhim which dives into the history and also essentials of the genre. It's definitely worth a watch, but in short, it's basically an offshoot of industrial music, which combines the organic instrumentation that you would come to expect out of folk music. So, what you end up with, especially with this album right here, is a sound that's equal parts organic and inauthentic, which results in this sort of eerie atmosphere. Now, but what ends when the cymbals shatter is generally considered to be the best Death in June album. And while I admit I haven't heard any other Death in June albums as of me writing this review, I can't really imagine anything else in its discography topping this because, wow, this is really, really great. And what's funny is that when I first heard this album, I was honestly expecting to not really care for it all that much for reasons I'll get into in a little bit. But on first listen, I thought it was overall good, but nothing super special. Then on my second listen, I found more appreciation for it, but still it wasn't really something that I thought I would fall super deep in love with, and I put the album aside for a couple of weeks. However, on my third listen, I don't know what happened, but something about this album just clicked super hard for me. All the tracks that I wasn't super huge on at first grew on me super hard, and I think once it was over, I just put it back on again, which is something that I don't really do often with albums. But before I dive a bit deeper into why I love this album, I should probably address the criticisms that are often lobbied against Death in June in general. You know, besides the whole Nazi shit. Perhaps the biggest one I've seen is that the vocals are extremely monotone, and after listening to this album, I'm going to be honest, yeah, I can definitely hear what people mean. There's a couple of songs on this album where David Tibet, a leader of another well-known neo-folk project, Current 93, takes lead vocal duties, and he sounds a lot more lively than Douglas does on the rest of the album. So, yeah, I could definitely see why someone, especially who is already against Death in June on principle because of, again, the Nazi shit, would not find his vocals enjoyable. It also doesn't help that there are some passages where he would just sing the same lines over and over again. I think this is most obvious on the song The Giddy Edge of Light, where really half or more than half the song is just him singing the same two lines over and over again. All of this I completely understand, but Here's why I love this album despite all of what I just said, and it's actually a pretty simple explanation. I just think it sounds pretty. Granted, I am still new to the Neofolk genre in general, so perhaps there are other albums out there that sound even more gorgeous than this one. But yeah, I just really love how this album sounds. There are some songs that, sonically anyways, could almost pass for like acoustic-driven songs done by like the Smiths or someone like that. And I think that's another reason why I find interest in this album. Even though by this point, Death and June are by no means a post-punk act, the songwriting is still pretty catchy in the same way a post-punk song would be, so I think that lineage helps me connect with this album even more. This album has 12 songs totaling to about 46 minutes, and for the most part, they're pretty straightforward in composition and structure. The only song that really strays away from the formula really is the song This Is Not Paradise, which is a bit more meandering than the rest of the album. Beyond that, songs like the opening, Death is the Martyr of Beauty, make for great slow burns, while other tracks like He's Disabled and Little Black Angel and the title track are a bit more upbeat in tempo and help lighten up the mood a little bit, even if they do still display a sense of eeriness with how the more electronics are used. Like the intro of He's Disabled, which utilized some odd vocal effects. Also, if I'm being honest, I feel like every song on this album is fantastic for pretty similar reasons, though one other thing that I do find fascination with this album is that the way it ends is kind of abrupt and almost sudden. The title track has a very repetitive outro, but when it stops, it pretty much stops dead in its tracks. There's no fade out, there's no concluding chord or whatever. It's a very interesting way to close out the album, and I guess in some strange way entices me to listen to the album all over again. I previously mentioned that big criticism that is often thrown at Death in June is that it is very monotone in its vocal approach. And while I do understand that criticism wholeheartedly, like I said earlier, I feel like the monotone vocals in an odd way kind of enhances the experience. Like, this is an album that, while lively, is still rather ominous, and I feel like the deadpan vocals add to that ominous feel and tone. I believe also that most, if not all, of these songs are based off of already existing songs composed by this cult named the People's Temple Choir, which were then given a morbid twist by Douglas P. I feel like diving into the origins of the original He's Able album would be rather time-consuming, and Lord knows I don't have much interest in listening to gospel music done by a suicide cult of all things. Thankfully, Wyattxhim has also done a video about that release, so if you want to learn more about it, there you go. I guess one final thing that I find fascinating about this album is the physical releases. For back in 1992, when this album was first released, I believe that this album was initially sold in a white digipack, with the front just having the album title and the infamous Token 6 symbol. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. And the actual album artwork was in the sleeve of the digipack with the liner notes and all that good stuff. It's also worth mentioning that the disc itself, at least the original pressings, were pressed onto CDs that used gold, and as such they were prone to disc rot. And yeah, there were also vinyl pressings as well, but due to Douglas P. and David Tippett getting on bad terms with each other, there haven't been any vinyl represses as far as I'm aware. I know I normally don't dive into the actual packaging of an album when it comes to reviews, but I thought that info was interesting enough to briefly mention. And yeah, that's basically this album in a nutshell. I noticed this video was on the whole pretty unconventional compared to my previous reviews, but like I said earlier, Neofolk as a genre is still relatively new to me, so I guess I just wanted to document my overall thoughts and opinions as of right now. And because I've grown to really love this album, I just wanted to talk about it some. It's an album that has a very distinct sound, and yeah, you could argue that there should be more variety in its track listing, but on the whole, I think this album is very well done, and when it comes to Neofolk, this is definitely one of those albums that I would potentially recommend to someone who's interested in getting into the genre of music. I say potentially because, well, again, Douglas P. is a piece of shit, so there is that boundary that you might not be willing to cross, which is totally understandable. I don't mean to shame anyone who would be hesitant to listen to this, but I'd say if you're curious enough, definitely give this a listen. It's very great. And yeah, that's all I have to say about this album. I hope you all enjoyed this review or ramble or whatever you want to call it, and I hope you got something out of it. And I'll see y'all next time. Bye.